Hey guys, I welcome you all to a whole new live session from Edureka, which is on Python examples. Yes, that's right. We will be coding in Python. Before I deep dive into this, let's just have a quick overlook at what's the course for this session. To begin with, let's just brush up about Python programming language. And then we will look at the most commonly and frequently asked Python programs, that is, program to print the prime numbers, palindrome of a sequence, star pyramids, Fibonacci series, and the very famous bubble sort program. After this, we will go a little deeper into Python and look at some of the most common libraries and a few examples related to the real-time use of these libraries. So I hope you're clear with this. Just give me a quick confirmation in the chat box. Okay, I see confirmations from many of y'all. So now let's move on towards our first topic of this session, which is Introduction to Python. Python is a very popular programming language, guys, which was developed by Guido van Rossum. It's used generally for server-side web development, solving mathematical problems, software development, etc. Guys, Python is very popular because it's a cross-platform programming language with simple syntax and can be treated in a procedural, object-oriented, or functional manner. So with this, I think I've given you enough about why Python is famous and in demand. Now let's move on and see how to code in Python. Do not worry guys, it's very easy and at the same time very interesting. Here are some of the programs that we will be writing in this session today. The first program we're going to write is printing the prime numbers. I'll jump on from here to my Jupyter notebook. As you can see on the screen over here, I have a program that will print prime numbers for me. Do not worry, I will explain each and every line to you one after the other. First of all, let me just brief you about prime numbers. A prime number, as we all know, is a number that is divisible only by 1 and itself. So here is a simple program that helps us find the prime numbers. Do not look at the code and get scared because it's very simple. All I've done over here is I've made use of a small if-else block. I'll explain each and every line to you one after the other. Please concentrate and please do the same on your Jupyter notebook as well. If you have any doubts, please do let me know in the chat box and my team is going to reply to you. Okay, the first line of my code over here will help me take input from the user. So for that, what I've done is I'm making use of this input function. This function will allow the user to enter the input at runtime. You can actually directly give the input as well, but it's always better to take input from the user at runtime. So I'm doing the same over here. I've used this int over here because I want only integer inputs and I do not want anything else. I'm storing the number given by the user in a variable a. Now, my first thing that I have to check for is if the number entered by the user is greater than 1. Because if the number is equal to 1 or 0, it is considered to be even. So the user needs to supply an input which is greater than 1. So I hope you've understood till here. So now moving on towards the next line of our code. The next line of our code contains a for loop. So before explaining this for loop, let me just explain this range function to you all. The range function actually generates a list of numbers and allows us to iterate over them. So over here, as you can see, my first parameter is 2 and the second parameter is a, which is the number that is entered by the user. I've used 2 over here because I want the range function to start generating numbers from 2 and stop at a. And now for every element that is present in the range of 2, a, if that number divides a and the remainder is 0, then a is not a prime number, else a is a prime number. So I hope you're understanding this. If any number in the range of 2, a divides a, which means if the remainder is 0, then the number is not prime, else the number is prime. And my last else block is for this if statement where I'm checking if a is greater than 1 or not. So if a is less than or equal to 1, then this else block is going to be executed, which will print the output that the number is not prime. So I hope you've understood this program. Now let me just run this and show you all how this works. Like I told you all, the first thing I was doing over here is asking the user to enter some input. Now let me give some input over here. I'll give the input to be 0 and I'll run this. As you can see over here, when I entered the number to be 0, it has returned that the number is not prime. which means this else block has got executed. And that is because this if condition is not met. Now let me give some other input and see what happens. I'll give the input, say 8, and I'll run this. So as we all know, when I give the input as 8, we all know that 8 is not a prime number, and hence I have the output that it is not prime. So I hope you're understanding how this works. Okay, let me give some other input and see how it happens. I'll give some number which I know is prime, say for example 5, and I'll run this. Okay, so when I gave the input to be 5, the output that is returned is prime, which means the number 5 is prime. So I hope you all have understood how to write prime number program in Python. Now moving on towards the second program of this session, which is to check if a sequence is a palindrome. A palindrome, guys, is a sequence of characters that reads the same in either direction. That is from the left hand side to the right hand side and from the right hand side to the left hand side. Say for example the word madam or Malayalam or the number 121 or 00800 etc. So now I want my program to check whether a sequence is a palindrome or not. To do so, I have a very simple code over here wherein the first line of my code allows the user to give some input, and that input is stored in a variable a. In the second line of my code over here, I have another variable b in which I'm going to store the reverse of a. A of ::(-1) will help me reprint a reversed copy of a into b. Now after doing this, all I'm going to do is use the if block and check if a is equal to b. And if a is equal to b, then the output I want to be printed is a palindrome. Else, if this condition is not met, which means if a is not equal to b, then it's going to return the output that the sequence is not a palindrome. Now I'll just hit run and see what happens. As you can see, it's asking me to give some input. So I'll enter some input over here. Say I will use 232 and I will run this. As you can see, when I gave the number as 232, which reads the same from LHS to RHS and from RHS to LHS, it has returned that this is a palindrome, which means the if block is executed. Now let me give something else and see what it returns. As you can see, when I give the input as 321, it has returned that this is not a palindrome, which means the else block is executed. Now let me give some string and see what happens. As you can see, when I gave the input as Edureka, then it has returned that this is not a palindrome. So I hope you all have understood these two programs. Just give me a quick response in the chat box. And if you have any queries, my team is always here to reply to you all. Now let's move on towards the next program of this session, which is printing star pyramids or asterisk pyramids or triangles. As you can see on the screen, I just have two lines of code in my function. The first line is a for loop and the second line is a print statement. The first line helps me generate numbers from 0 to r. If I do not specify from where it has to start, the range function will start generating numbers from 0. And r is the limit that I have specified as the number of rows that I want in my output. As you all can see on the screen, I just have a 4-line code that is going to help me print 3 types of asterisk triangles or pyramids. Now let's move ahead and see what exactly this code is doing over here. In the first line of my code, I've actually defined a function. To define a function, all you have to do is use the def keyword and give some name to your function. In my case, the name of my function is pyfunc, and I've passed one parameter to it, which is r, and r is the number of rows that I want in my asterisk triangle or pyramid. In this function, I just have 2 lines of code, after which I'm calling the function. Now, within the function, I have a for loop and a print statement. Now, with the help of just these 2 lines, I will be able to print the kind of sequence that I want. All I'm doing over here is I'm using the range function, and I want range function to generate values from 0 to r. As you can see, I've just given one parameter to this, which means I'm not telling from where it has to start. So if I do not specify from where the range function has to start generating values, it's going to start generating from 0 and it will generate till r. After that, I have a simple print statement over here. Now what exactly this print statement does is, it's going to print two parts to my output. The first part is an empty string multiplied to the number of rows minus x, which is the iterator value, minus 1. Now, since this is an empty string, whatever number is multiplied by this, it is going to generate null, which means that whenever this is an empty string, I will have a null output to this, which means I can also assume this to be 0. Then I have another part of this print statement. Now in this part, I'm actually printing the asterisks or the star symbols. To do so, all I've done is in the string part, I've used star as the sign that I want. After that, I've multiplied it to 2 cross the iterator value plus 1. First time, the iterator value is going to be 0. So I will have an asterisk, that's a star, multiplied by 2 into 0 is going to give me 0 plus 1, which means star into 1. Now, the output I'm going to have for this is a single star. So after the first iteration, the output to be produced is 1 star. And the same thing happens over and over again for the range of r. Now let me just run this program and show you all how this works. As you can see over here, r value that I've specified is 4. And when I run this, I have a triangle that's printed with 4 rows. And like I told you, the first line of my output when x is equal to 0 is 1 star. And when x value gets incremented, I have the following sequence. So I hope you all have understood how to print an asterisk triangle. Now let's move on and see how to print an asterisk pyramid. Don't worry guys, you don't have to write another program for that. In the same program and one small change and you will have a beautiful different output. And let's see how to do that. My function is going to remain the same. My loop is going to remain the same. All I want is some space before the first asterisk symbol. So what I'm going to do is to this null string, I will add a space character and I will run this. As you can see, when I inserted one space to this empty string, I've got this beautiful pyramid over here. Now what if I want the triangle to start from the right hand side and move towards the left hand side? Don't worry, you don't have to rewrite the code. One small change to the same code is enough. So I hope you all see that. I just inserted 2 white spaces over here and then I hit run and you can see that the triangle has started from the right hand side and is moving towards the left hand side. Now let me just explain to you all what exactly the space is doing over here. When there was no space, the print statement was printing a null over here, which means there is nothing over here. But when there's one space, it's going to multiply this one space value with r minus x minus 1, which in our case is r, which is 4. And for the first iteration, the x value will be 0. So 4 minus 0 minus 1, which is going to give me 3 as the result. One space character multiplied by r minus x minus 1, which is 4 minus the first iterator value, which is 0, minus 1. And the output I'll get for this is 3 space characters. One space character into 3. One white space character into 3, which is going to give me 3 white space characters. Now let me just move on towards the output and show you all where the first asterisk is present. I'll just draw a line over here. As you can see, the first asterisk symbol has 3 white spaces preceded to it. And the same way it happens on all the lines. So as you can see, my first asterisk symbol has 3 white spaces preceded to it. So I hope you all have understood how to print star pyramids or star triangles. Okay, now moving on towards the next program of this session, which is writing a code to print the Fibonacci series. I'll jump on to my Jupyter notebook. I'll erase all the drawings and I have a code over here that will help me print the Fibonacci series. Now, what exactly is the Fibonacci series? Guys, Fibonacci series is a series of numbers in which each number is the sum of two preceding numbers. By definition, the first two Fibonacci numbers are 0 and 1. So, I'll just show you all a Fibonacci series example to you all. So as you can see over here, the first two numbers of the series are 0 and 1. And the third number is the sum of the previous two numbers. So my third number is 1, which is the sum of 1 and 0. And then I have 2, which is the sum of 1 and 1. Then I have 3, which is the sum of 2 and 1, and so on. So this is what Fibonacci series means. Now let's move on and see how do I write a code in Python that will help me print this series. Like always, my first line of code over here allows the user to enter the number of terms that he wants to see in the output. And I'm storing this to A. Next, I've specified my first element to be 0 and the second to be 1. Because these two numbers by definition are the first two numbers of a Fibonacci series. Then I have a small if-else block over here that is going to help me print the Fibonacci series. The first thing that I'm going to check over here is if A is less than or equal to 0. If the number of terms entered by the user is less than or equal to 0, then the series is going to contain only 0 as the output, which is the first element. So if the number of terms entered by the user is greater than 0, then it will go into this else block. Now what exactly is happening over here is the first thing that is to be printed is the first number and the second number. For this else block, the number should either be equal to 1 or greater than 1. So, when the number is greater than or equal to 1, the first number and the second number, which is 0 and 1, needs to be printed in the series. So for that, I've used this print statement and I've used this end method over here, and I've told that this end should end with a space character. So I've printed the first two numbers and then I'm using this end function. So first, I wanted to print 0 and then 1 and end with a space character. In Python, end comes as the parameter of the print statement, which by default is /n or the next line character. But in my case, I've changed it from the next line character to a white space character. You can change to anything you want. You can also use commas or colons between your series. Since I want white space characters, I will leave it as a white space character over here. Now, if the number entered by the user is greater than 1, then the next block of code is going to be executed. Like I've already explained the range function to you all, here the range function is going to produce items from 2 to A, where A is the limit that is specified by the user. And using this for loop, I'm going to iterate over each of the element that is produced by this range function. What I'm going to do after that is, I'll be using this next function. This next function actually returns the next item from the iterator. So what I've done is I've equated this next to first plus second, which means in the first case, the first element is 0 and the second element is 1. So next, which is the third element, will be 0 plus 1 and this will also be 1. So as you can see, the third element will also be 1. Now after that, all I'm going to do is print next and end with a space character. After this, my second element is going to become first and the next element is going to become second. So I hope you are understanding how this sequence is proceeding. Initially, 0 and 1 are first and second elements. And after one iteration, this one becomes the first element and this one becomes the second element. And after the second iteration, this one becomes the first element and this 2 over here becomes the second element. And that goes on until it satisfies the number of terms that the user has entered. Now let me just hit run and show you all how this works. I'll give the terms to be say 6 and I'll run this. As you can see, I have 6 elements of the Fibonacci series as my output. Now let me give some other number and see how it works. This time I will give the input to be 0. As you can see, when I entered it to be 0, then it has given me the output that the requested series is 0. This is because 0 is the first element of a Fibonacci series. Now let me get back to my presentation and see what is the next program of this session. The next program of this session is bubble sort program. I hope you all know what this bubble sort actually does. The bubble sort algorithm is actually a very simple sorting algorithm that repeatedly steps through the list, compares adjacent pairs, and swaps them if they are in wrong order. This is done until the list is sorted. Now let's move ahead and see how to write a code that will help us implement the bubble sort algorithm in Python. As you all can see over here, the first thing that I've done is defined a function. So whenever I want to sort using the bubble sort algorithm, all I have to do is call the bubble sort function. Here the name I've given is BS. You can give any name of your choice. I've passed one parameter to it, which is the unsorted list. After this, I have a small block of code that will help me implement the bubble sort algorithm. To do this, all I'm doing first is storing the value of length of a minus 1 to another variable b. Now this is done because the number of iterations that are needed to sort a list is 1 less than the length of the list itself. Now, moving on further, I have two for loops over here. My first for loop will allow me to select the first element, and then I have a second for loop that will help me compare between the selected items. So over here, I have for y in range of b minus x, where b is the length of a minus 1 and x is the first for loop iterator, if a of y is greater than a of y plus 1, which means over here, as you can see, if a of y becomes 3 and a of y plus 1 becomes 6. So if a of y is greater than a of y plus 6. So if a of y is greater than a of y plus 1, then swap this, which means a of y comma a of y plus 1 will become a of y plus 1 comma a of y. So if 3 is greater than 6, then 3 and 6 will be swapped. So in the first iteration of here, since 3 is not greater than 6, this will not be swapped. After this, my second for loop will take 6 as the first element and compare it with 1. So over here, a of y will be 6 and a of y plus 1 will be 1. Since 6 is greater than 1, these two will be swapped. After that, it's going to check between 6 and 8. So between 6 and 8, 6 is smaller than 8, so they will not be swapped. So I hope you're understanding this. After the first iteration, my list is going to look something like this. So I'll have 3, 1, 6, 8. So after the first iteration, my list is going to look something like this, but this is not sorted still. So for this, what happens is my loop will go back to this first for loop and it will select another item and compare between adjacent pairs. So I hope you've understood how this bubble sort code actually works. Okay, now let me just erase this and run this code. To run the code, you can just use Shift Enter, or you can also use Control Enter. Just notice the difference between Shift Enter and Control Enter. When you use Shift Enter, it executes the code and passes on the control to the next kernel. But when you use Control Enter, it's going to execute the code and the control is going to remain in the same kernel. So as you can see, I have a sorted list as my output. So I hope you all have understood how to implement the bubble sort program in Python. If you have any queries, do let us know in the chat box. My team is here to reply to you all. So now moving on towards our presentation. We are done with few of the basic programs for this session. Now moving on towards the next topic of this session, which is Python libraries. Guys, Python libraries are actually collection of modules which are reusable chunks of code. Now these chunks of code are nothing but methods and functions. They can be reused whenever you want by just importing them. And they are used for implementing machine language, web scraping, solving scientific and mathematical problems, etc. In today's session, I'll be covering the following 4 libraries, which is NumPy, Matplotlib, Pandas, and Beautiful Soup. So moving on towards the first library of this session. NumPy is a library for Python programming language, adding support for large multi-dimensional arrays and matrices. along with a large collection of high-level mathematical functions to operate on these arrays. It also provides tool for integrating C and C++, etc. Now let's move on towards our Jupyter Notebook and see how you can actually use this NumPy library. To import the NumPy library, all you have to do is use import NumPy as NP. Now this is a very common method. Here NumPy is the name of the library, whereas NP is an alias name. You can also import this library by its original name, which is NumPy, or you can also use from NumPy import star, which is going to import everything that is present in the NumPy library. I'll just execute this code. I'll hit Shift Enter because I want the control to be passed to the next kernel. When you see a star next to the kernel on your Jupyter Notebook, it means that the code is being executed. And when it is done, it gives a number. To create a NumPy array, all you have to do is give a name to your array and equate it to np.arange of whatever length of items you want in that array. So here I've given 8 and I've printed this array. Array.array type, and it is not numpy.nd array type. So the arrays of array module are different and NumPy arrays are different. Now moving on towards the next attribute of this NumPy array. Here, if you want to find the size of your array, you can use the size attribute. I've created another NumPy array over here, which is new array, and I've given the A range to be 8, which means I want 8 elements to be present in my array. I'll just hit run. As you can see, it tells that the size of the new array is 8. Now let me try to use the size attribute with A, which is not a NumPy array, and see what happens. As you can see, when I run this, it has thrown an error, which is an attribute error, and it says array.array object has no attribute size. To find the size of a normal array, you can use the len function, just like how I've done over here. So the length of A is 4. So now moving on towards the data type of your array. Here I've created an array AR as a NumPy array, and I want to know what type of elements it stores. I'll just use ar.dtype and hit run. As you can see, the data type is int32. Now if you want to know the shape of your array, all you have to do is use the name of your array dot shape, which in my case is ar.shape, and hit run. As you can see, I have a one-dimensional array with 8 elements, and that is the shape of my array. Now if I want to reshape this array, I can do that as well. To reshape my array, all I have to do is use the reshape function. And here you will have to specify what kind of reshape do you want. So here, originally I have a single row and 8 columns in that. When I'm using reshape, I've given 2, 4, which means I want 2 rows and 4 columns. I can use the other way around as well, 4 rows and 2 columns, which I've specified for my new array. Let me just hit run and show you all what exactly happens. As you can see, when I use the reshape function with 2, 4, it has returned an output with 2 rows and 4 columns. And when I used 4, 2, I've got 4 rows and 2 columns. So I hope you've understood how to use some of these attributes. Now let's move on and see what kind of operations you can perform on NumPy arrays. In case you want to increment the values of your array, all you have to do is this. Just give the name of your array and specify whatever value you want it to be incremented by. So here I want to increment the values of AR by 1. So I've used AR plus 1. And then I've printed my array AR. Let's see what happens when I run this. As you can see, for the first print statement, it has returned an output by incrementing all the elements present in A by 1. And please note guys that the original array AR has not changed. So when I increment the value, I've got another output, but my original array AR is unchanged. Now let me try to subtract something from the original array AR. As you can see, an output has been returned with all values of A reduced by 1. Like I've already told y'all, the values of AR don't change. This is just the output for AR minus 2. Same way, you can multiply your array as well. And if you want, you can divide it as well. Here, I've divided the array AR by 3 and I've printed the result into another array X. And when I find the data type of this x, it has returned that it's float type. As you can see, I have all float values in x. So I hope you've understood this. Now let's try to solve some linear equations using the NumPy array. As you all can see over here, I have two arrays A and B. Now let me just show you how it actually looks. My array A looks like this and my array B is this. I want to find some two unknowns, that's x and y. All I'm going to do is, this is my array A, this is A, and here I want some unknowns x and y. So this is my array A, and this is C, and this is B. To find the unknown values x and y, all I've done over here is used C is equal to np.linearalgebra, LINALG dot solve A comma B. Now let me hit run and show you all what happens. As you can see, it's given me the values for x and y. So x has some minus 5.42 as its value and y is 3.04 as its value. So I hope you've understood how to use NumPy arrays. If you have any doubts or queries, do let me know in the chat box and my team is here to help you. Now moving on towards the next library of this session, which is the Matplotlib library. Matplotlib is a 2D plotting library which produces publication quality figures. Now you can use this Matplotlib either in Jupyter Notebook, IPython shell or Python scripts, etc. With Matplotlib, you can generate plots, histograms, power spectra, bar charts, error charts, scatter plots, etc. with just a few lines of code. Now let's move on to our Jupyter Notebook and use the Matplotlib library. The first thing you have to do is import that library using import matplotlib.pyplot as plt and run that. And after that, I'm going to import something called as style over here. Now this will actually allow us to give different kinds of colors and labels or etc. to our graph. Without this, our graph is going to look very simple. Now, let me just plot a small graph and show you how this works. I'm going to give some x coordinates. And to plot a simple line graph, all you have to do is use plt.plot, and since I have used only x over here, I'll specify the parameter as x and I will run this. As you can see, when I hit run, I have a simple line graph that has been drawn for me over here. But this actually looks very plain and incomplete. Neither does it specify what is x-axis, nor does it specify what is y-axis, nor is it giving me any details about what this graph actually shows. So to do so, I have another program over here. In the first slide over here, I've used plt.title, which means I want to give some title to my graph. I've just given graph as the title. You can give any title of your choice. After that, I've specified the x and y coordinates. Following that, I've plotted x and y, and I want the line color to be blue, and I want the label to be named as example, and I've also changed the line width and I've specified it to be 3. After that, I've used plt.xLabel as time and plt.ylabel as frequency. And I also want to give some grid lines to my graph where I've given grid to be true and the color to be red. Following that, I've used plt.legend, which will help me print the labels of this graph. Now let me just execute this and show you all how this works. As you can see the difference between these two graphs. The first graph did not contain anything, neither the title, nor the X and Y labels, nor the grid lines. But over here, as you all can see, I have a label, I have the Y label, I have the X label, and I also have a title for this graph. And as you can see, there are grid lines as well. So this is how you can make use of the Matplotlib library. Now, what if you want to use some other kind of graph and not a line graph? So in case you want to use a bar graph, all you have to do is use plt.bar and give the values that you want to specify in your bar graph. You'll have to give a list of values. Say I'll give 3, 2, 1, and all you have to do is use plt.bar, give whatever values you want, and label the lines as whatever name you want. Here, I've just used example 1 and example 2 as the name of my bar graph lines. I'll just execute this and show you all how it looks. As you all can see over here, I've printed a bar graph. The same way, you can plot different types of graphs, such as a scatter plot or a histogram. If you want to plot a scatter graph, all you have to do is use plt.scatter, and when you want to print a histogram, you can use plt.hist. For more details about this, you can let me know in the chat box and my team will reply to you all. Now let's get back to our presentation and see what is the next library that we'll be covering in this session. The next library that we'll be covering under this session is the pandas library. Now pandas actually stands for panel data. Using this library, you can do data manipulation and analysis. This library is actually built on top of NumPy. To install this library on Anaconda platform, you can just use conda install pandas, or on IPython shell, you can use pip install pandas. Now let's get back to our Jupyter Notebook and see how to use this library. The first thing that you will have to do when you're using this library, as always, is to import the library. And over here, I've imported using import pandas as PD. So wherever I have to use this library name, I'm going to use the alias name, which is PD. After that, I'm going to hit run. If pandas is installed in your Anaconda environment, then it's not going to throw any error. In case you're facing any errors while importing any of your libraries, all you have to do is go to the Anaconda prompt and install that library. Just like this. Conda install pandas. And hit enter. After that, it's going to install pandas for you. Remember that it's going to ask you a question whether you want to install it or not. Just say yes when you have to do so. Now let's get back to our Jupyter Notebook over here. The first thing I'm doing over here is creating a dictionary. So I hope you all know what a dictionary is. A dictionary in Python is a collection of unordered, changeable, and indexed values. Now these are actually key value pairs. As you can see over here, I have a key and a value list. And all the elements present are key value pairs. So every key will have a value and it's a pair. Dictionaries are mutable. Now moving on towards how to create a data frame. All I have done to create a data frame over here is given a name to my data frame, and then I've used pd.dataframe and given the name of the dictionary. Now let's hit run and see what happens. So here I'm creating a data frame for a supermarket where I want to see on each day how many items of grocery, clothes, and utensils have been sold. And here I've specified the day as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And I've given the index values as well. Now let's move on and see how to slice this data frame and fetch only the top 3 values from this data frame. All you have to do is give the name of the data frame, dot head, and how many ever values you want to fetch from that data frame. So here I want to fetch 3 of the first initial values. So I'll just use a.head of 3 and run this. As you can see over here, I fetched the first 3 entries of this data frame. Now, in case you want to fetch the elements that are present towards the end of your data frame, all you have to do is use a.tail and specify how many ever elements you want from there and hit run. As you can see, I've accessed the last 2 entries from my data frame. Now, in case you want to concatenate 2 different data frames, let's see how you have to do that. As you can see over here, I've defined 2 data frames X and Y. I'm concatenating X and Y into another data frame M. And to do so, I've used the concat function and passed M as the parameter. Let me hit run and see how this works. As you can see over here, I have the index values, I have the day column, and then I have the grocery items, the clothes, and the utensils. I've concatenated the 2 different data frames into one data frame. So this is how you concatenate different data frames using the concat function. Now what if you want to add a different column to your data frame? All you have to do is use the join function. Here I have some data frame A, and to this data frame I want to add the price and the value list. Here I want to add a new column which contains the price. To do this, all I have to do is use the join function. As you can see, when I used the join function to my original data frame, the price column has been added. So now I hope you're clear with how to use the pandas library. Now let's get back to our presentation and see what is our next library that we will be covering in this session. The last and final library that we will be covering in this session is the Beautiful Soup library. This library is actually used for pulling data out of XML and HTML files. It provides ways for navigating, searching, and modifying parse trees. It creates a parse tree for the parsed pages that can be used to extract the data from HTML. Now this is actually useful in web scraping. To install this library, all you have to do in Anaconda environment, use conda install -c Anaconda Beautiful Soup 4. And on IPython shell, you can use pip install Beautiful Soup 4. So now moving on towards the Jupyter Notebook and see how to do web scraping. The first thing that you will have to do, I'm going to be scraping the VTU website over here. So I'll just open that and I will use Ctrl+Shift+I. As you can see over here, when I inspect this site, I've got all the HTML code for the information that is present on this site. Now this looks very complicated. Now let's go on to our Jupyter Notebook and see how actually to scrape a website. The first thing that you will have to do is import requests. Now this library actually helps us for making HTTP requests in Python. Without this, you cannot extract any information from any site. So I'll just import this and hit run. After which, from BS4, I will import the Beautiful Soup library. And then I've done something very interesting over here. I've used the get function from the requests library and I've passed the link as a parameter from where I want to fetch the data. So in my case, it is VTU website. So I've given the link of the VTU website to this get function and I will hit run. The first thing after doing this is to check for the status code. Now what the status code actually tells is whether that site is going to allow you to do web scraping or not. Many websites actually do not allow web scraping. And in today's session, we are doing it purely for education purpose. So now let me check the status code of this. As you can see, when I check the status code, it has returned 200, which means I can scrape this website. If the output returned is anything other than 200, it means that the website is not allowing you to do web scraping. Now let's move on and see what is the data that I've actually extracted from this website. To do so, I've used the content attribute. So R is where I've stored it and I've used r.content. And as you can see, I've got a very ugly looking output over here. Now this is where beautiful soup comes into picture. All you have to do is use any variable name and then beautiful soup and pass the content that you have extracted. After that, all you have to do is print your variable name, which in my case is soup.prettify, and then I will run this. As you can see over here, the output is so much better than what it was previously. Now moving on further in this session. As you can see over here, whenever I scroll through the HTML content of this page, it shows me what is present under that. Now from here, I can extract any information that I want. Say for suppose, I want to extract all the div that are present in this site. All I will do is use soup.findAll. This function will help us find all the div attributes and it's going to return the output. As you can see over here, all the div tags that are present in the VTU website have been returned as my output over here. Now what if I want all the links that are present in the website I have scraped? All I have to do is make use of the for loop and iterate over all the anchor tags and get wherever the href links are present. Let me just hit run and show y'all. As you can see, all the links that are present in the VTU website have been scraped over here. You can open any link of your choice and go to that link directly. So now moving on. In the previous line, we extracted all the href links that are present. Now let us extract all the text that is present in the anchor tag. To do so, all I have used is a for loop and then find all anchor tags and print link.text. And I'll hit run. As you can see, all the text present in the anchor tags has been returned as my output. Now what if you want to find some special class from your website? So from here, I want to extract all that is present under the entry class. Since I have a table that is present in this entry class, I'm going to extract all that is present in this entry class. Now let's get back to our Jupyter Notebook and see how I'm going to do this. All I have done is find all and I've specified the tag as section and the class as entry. And then I'll hit run. And I've saved this to a variable named Z. As you can see, all that is present in the entry class has been returned over here. Let me extract the text that is present in the entry class. To do so, I'll just use a for loop to traverse through it and use x.text. As you can see over here, all the text that is present in the entry class has been returned as my output. So in case I want the content from some specific line, all I can do is use the same for loop and then print x.contents and specify the line number .text. As you can see, by doing this, I've extracted only that text which is present at the place where I have specified. Now what if you want to extract the table that was present over here? That is this table specifying the serial number, the name of the college and the USN code. All you have to do to scrape a table is, for every element that is present in Z, where Z already holds the entry class items, I'm going to iterate over all the elements that are present in this Z, which is the entry class content, and I'm going to print x.table. Over here, I'm just storing it into another variable as S. Now I will run this and show y'all what happens. As you can see over here, I've extracted the table, but I do not want these tr and td tags. To do this, I'm going to write a small block of code. Over here, I will use the for loop and I'll give any iterator name. Here, I've given the iterator name as row, and for every row that is present in the table and for every cell present in that row, I want to print it. Now let me just hit run and show y'all what happens. As you can see over here, I've scraped the table just using two simple for loops and storing them in a variable. So I hope you're clear with this. If you have any doubts, do let me know in the chat box and my team will reply to you all. So this was our last topic of this session. I hope you've enjoyed and learned something new. Please make sure to practice as much as possible and share your knowledge with others, because this is how you learn and remember. If you have any queries or suggestions, Please do let me know in the comment section and I will revert to you at the earliest. Take care and goodbye.